Hi everybody, good Friday evening to you and welcome to our regularly scheduled edition of What's It To Ya with Carter and Jack. Great to see you once again. A lot to talk about on this evening's show. The Final Four starts up tomorrow night. UConn, Kentucky, Florida, and Wisconsin will face off at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas for the national title. We'll talk about who you should be rooting for if you're a fan of college basketball as a whole and whether any of these teams, UConn especially, should be labeled a Cinderella story, as well as our pick for the title game and our pick for those Final Four games as well. All the picks are straight ahead. Also in baseball, opening day has come and gone, and the baseball season is now in full swing. We'll tell you everything you need to know if you're a Yankee and Mets fan. Can the Mets really be contenders like GM Sandy Alderson almost hinted that they would be? Plus, we've got every single division in the Bigs and the World Series picked for you. That is coming up straight ahead. Plus, my parting shot. What's It To Ya starts right now. To everybody, it's What's It To Ya. I am Carter Woodiel, and he is Jack Worth. We have a lot of stuff to get to on tonight's show, as I said before, but we are going to start in basketball. We're going to start with the Final Four. It's a huge event. Starts tomorrow night in Arlington, Texas. The first game at 6:09. It's UConn and Florida, and then Wisconsin taking on Kentucky shortly thereafter. UConn and Kentucky, UConn a 7 seed and Kentucky the 8 seed, are the two teams that nobody thought would be here at the start of the tournament. But do you think either of these teams should really be called a Cinderella going into this Final Four?
Well, I mean, certainly not Kentucky. I mean, we know they got an 8 seed, but you say no one predicted them to get this far at the beginning of the tournament. Well, let's look back to the beginning of the season. Actually, everyone predicted to get this far. Everyone predicted them to get this far and farther, maybe. They were the #1 team in the preseason polls.
There were people saying that they were going to go undefeated.
So I think Kentucky. You can't say Kentucky is Cinderella because it's sort of like they're meeting expectations. Maybe not expectations that were set 2 weeks ago, but the expectations that were set for them at the beginning of the season. I mean, they're doing right what they should be doing.
Right, I agree with that. I mean, any team that people think is going to go 40-0 is not going to be considered a Cinderella. I want to hear what you think about UConn, though, because this is a team that lost by huge numbers to Louisville right before the tournament began and was never, although it kind of was there at the bottom end of the top 25 for a long portion of the season, was never considered a top-tier team. Now they're in the Final Four. You think this constitutes a Cinderella run?
I think it absolutely does. I think you just said it right there. I think that the fact that no one thought they could do it and now they're here, that's Cinderella right there.
I don't think that's true.
Why not?
Well, because the thing to me, if you're talking Cinderella, a lot of times a Cinderella school is somebody that we haven't heard of. And by haven't heard of, I don't mean that we don't know it exists. Dayton's a Cinderella. We've heard of them, and they've got a good program. But it's somebody that we do not associate with making deep runs into the tournament. Although UConn certainly was not a team that anybody expected would make it this far, ever, at a point in the season, they won the championship in 2011. And they're one of the most popular teams in their area, in their market in the Northeast. And so to say, a Cinderella team is not a team that fills Madison Square Garden with its fans. That's not a Cinderella team. It has to be a team that we don't know very much about and is gaining a lot from a tournament. I don't feel like this is a magical run by the UConn Huskies, considering they have a tradition of excellence that's been established for quite some time now.
But I don't think that's true. I don't think there are laws to the Cinderella story. I think
there should be.
But what does that even mean?
You don't want to just throw it around.
You can't be a Cinderella team because you're there's not a checklist. I just think a Cinderella in its purest form. No one thought they could do it. Well, guess what? Now they're here. I think that's what the UConn Huskies
But all
are.
their fans thought they could do it.
Hell, every fan thinks they could do it.
But what I'm saying is there are much more UConn fans than there are Dayton Flyers fans.
So you can't be a Cinderella because you have a lot of fans? That's ridiculous.
Yes, that's part of it.
I don't think so.
That's part of it because one of the big things about a Cinderella run is now you're gaining credibility and you're building a program. This is a huge jumpstart for your program. UConn doesn't need a jumpstart. It's UConn.
It's not about jumpstart. It's about Cinderella is. No one thought they could do it. Now they can. There's no definition to this one thing. It's not this concept that you need to meet all these requirements. It's this great thing where it's just like no one thought UConn was going to get this far.
I think I just have higher standards than you do when it comes to Cinderella.
Because I'm not judging Cinderella. There's no historical precedent. I just want to have a good time. I want to appreciate UConn for what they are, a Cinderella team.
But if I see Florida Gulf Coast win, if I see Dayton win, I think, wow, great for that program. But this is a really incredible thing. If I see UConn win, I think, okay, well that was unexpected, and that's it. That's a difference to me. I want to talk about now. The Cinderella team is one thing, but it's really interesting to me how when we look at these Final Four matchups, we've got one game. Each game has a top seed going up against a seed that was unexpected. We've got the 1 seed Florida against the 7 seed UConn, the 8 seed Kentucky against the 2 seed Wisconsin. And I want to ask, do you think it's better for basketball as a whole in the future to have one of those top seeds win and prove that the top seeds can get it done, or to have the excitement of one of those lower seeds winning it all?
I think it goes back to the lower seeds winning, because we hear so much about March Madness. Anything can happen, but I think what happens a lot of times is that first weekend is thrilling, the second weekend is fantastic as well, and then we get to the Final Four and it's like, okay, let's let the true team show themselves. So I think it's great if we can get a 7 seed or an 8 seed winning a title. We haven't seen an 8 seed win a title since 1985, the only time it happened. So I think it'd be great for college basketball to say, not only can we have this incredible madness the first 2 weekends, but look, we can truly see any team win a national championship.
But I think that's a huge issue. I mean, I remember one time we were talking about this earlier on the show. We were talking about, I think it was Duke, about looking forward to what they were doing in the NCAA tournament. And you mentioned, well, listen, Duke's going to get into the tournament, so it doesn't really matter where their seed, doesn't really matter how the regular season goes. Listen, obviously, the March Madness tournament is huge. Obviously, it devalues the regular season to a certain extent. But if we say, okay, a 7 seed can win the title, an 8 seed can win the title, a 1 seed and 2 seed can lose, I think in the long term, having those 1 and 2 seeds win most of the time is very good for college basketball, because it validates the regular season, which is something they desperately need considering how big their tournament is. Not that they're going back, but considering.
Okay, well, and then let's talk about now less about seeds and more about just the individual teams, which I think gears more towards UConn and Kentucky. Thing is, Wisconsin is a boring team. Wisconsin's a boring program.
Okay, I'm not going to argue with that.
Florida, I'm bored of Florida winning. I want to see some excitement. I want to see UConn, Kentucky wins. I think that most of the mainstream casual college basketball fans, I'm not talking about diehards, I'm talking about casual college basketball fans, would rather tune into a game that has an exciting team that doesn't have Florida versus Wisconsin.
And I'm not arguing with that. I'm not arguing with, obviously, I totally agree with you that a UConn-Kentucky championship game, or a championship game that just involved one of those teams, would be more exciting than Florida-Wisconsin. But I'm saying if you're talking about a casual fan tuning into the Final Four, if I'm a casual fan and I see Kentucky play Connecticut in a championship game at 7 and 8 and have one of those two teams win it, I'm going to watch that Final Four game. Am I going to watch any of the regular season? Probably not, because I'm going to look and say, well, the tournament's the only thing that matters. These two teams did not play well enough to get a top 6 seed in the tournament, and yet they still won. So that's all I'm going to watch.
And that it obviously exemplifies that the fundamental problem, or some could say it's a problem, some could say it's fantastic, but the problem with the college basketball regular season. But to me, I think that casual fan, if they see a team like UConn, maybe it builds excitement not just for this game, and then it builds excitement going forward.
Okay.
I hope UConn wins the tournament. I have Northeast bias.
I agree with you that UConn is definitely the most likable team in this tournament.
And I think let's just talk about another thing that college basketball struggles with, the perception of just, these guys are here for 1 year, play basketball, get out. So I think if we're looking about it that way, Kentucky is not the team you want to see win.
Right.
Because they're that same team who they're going to come out every year, they're going to get, if not the top, they're going to get a top 5 recruiting class. And, every year they're going to send a freshman or two to the NBA draft, and they're gone the next season. We look at UConn led by Shabazz Napier, who was on the team.
Boy, is he entertaining.
When they won the title back in 2011 with Kemba Walker. So it's not just like he's some kid who's 19 years old who's going to UConn because he has to, because the NBA says he can't just go straight out of high school. So I think in that regards too, I think it'd be nice to see a team led by a senior win for a change.
Totally agree with you. Totally agree. I mean, I agree with everything you said. UConn's a really likable team. They're a really entertaining team. But I feel like short-term versus long-term, I'd rather see a top seed win. Let's get to the picks. So let's start with UConn. They're taking on Florida in that first game in the Final Four. Who you got?
I think Florida's going to win, but I got UConn because I like UConn a lot more, and because I picked UConn in 2011. I picked them to go to the Sweet 16 this year. They have never let me down. If anything, they've exceeded my expectations, so I'm picking the Huskies.
I really want to pick UConn too, but I feel like Florida is just too good. I feel like if this is a team where UConn rather has met its match. I mean, look at Florida's defense. When you saw them play their Elite Eight game against Dayton, obviously UConn's a better team than Dayton is, but it's incredible how when you watch Florida play, how other teams are visibly struggling. They have to go in for 2 or 3 times to run 2-3 plays cuts to get a good shot off against the Florida defense. It's incredible just how much effort teams have to put in to get any type of decent shot off against this D. I think they'll shut down UConn, and I think they'll win the game.
Okay, and now moving on to the other side of the bracket, the second Final Four game, University of Wisconsin taking on the University of Kentucky. Who do you like?
I am going to go with the favorite again here. I think Wisconsin's going to win this game only because Frank Kaminsky is a player who you can throw the ball to and he can make things happen. And I don't think there's anything that Kentucky's 5 freshmen can do to stop that. This game will be entertaining. I think Wisconsin isn't as boring a team this year as they usually are. That's not to say they aren't boring, but I think that this will be entertaining enough, and I think Kentucky will give this team a run for their money. But I just feel like since they have that guy, Wisconsin, it'll be enough to give them this win and take them to the championship game.
I disagree again. I think I'm much more confident in this game. I think it's going to be really close. I think Kentucky's going to win because this is a Kentucky team that at the beginning of the season, everyone seemed to say, wow, this is an amazing team. So they have to have some talent coming in. We look at what they've done the last 4 games, winning their 4 tournament games. It looks like they finally put together. So who's to say they can't be the best team in the country like we thought they were in October and November?
But I think the argument against that is if they can put it together at any time, it can fall apart at any time. And I feel like Wisconsin is a time where it could do that. If we're going to talk about title game picks, we've got 2 completely different title games. So why don't you start? You've got the more entertaining one. I'd like to see your game better.
I got Kentucky and Connecticut. I got the UConn Huskies. Who else?
Yeah.
I mean, I like UConn. I really love Shabazz Napier. I'm gonna take him. It's a heart over head pick, but that was what I told myself when I picked Dayton to the Sweet 16. That
I picked that as well. We both had the Flyers in the Sweet 16, and we're both going to finish, tied for 45th out of 80 people in our pool?
Well, Louisville let me down.
Yeah. I've got in my title game, I've got Florida. I think that's the pick. If I'm going to say what's most likely to happen, it's the Florida Gators, not just because their defense is incredibly good, but because they can shoot the lights out, too. And if they are firing from beyond the arc, if Scotty Wilbekin and Dorial Finney-Smith and those guys are nailing jumpers, I don't see who wins against Florida. I don't.
UConn does.
All right.
Tidbit. All 4 Final Four teams, major public state schools. We got University of Connecticut, University of Florida, University of Wisconsin, and University of Kentucky.
Yeah, I did not put that together. Yeah, that's a great thing to hear, and I will not be, it's different from most years because I really want to watch this Final Four, and we're going to head to a break. That's all we've got for basketball today, but stay tuned for baseball. We're going to preview the season that is already in full swing. Will Tanaka live up to that signing? Can the Mets really contend? And on our picks for every single division in Major League Baseball and the World Series. Stay right there.
Slow down.
Slow down and move over.
And move over.
When you see lights, vests,
Or reflectors.
Please, give us some room. Slow down and move over.
when you need us.
We've got your back.
Do you have ours?
You got our back?
You got ours? You got our back? Please, slow down.
And move over.
My songs know what you did in the dark.
Welcome back. This is What's It To Ya. I am Carter Woodiel, and he is Jack Worth. We're going to move to our Major League Baseball section of the show. Our preview is look ahead to the upcoming season. Just a little under a month ago, Sandy Alderson, the general manager of the New York Mets, made a statement that got people really surprised when he said that the club that he was the GM of could win 90 games this season. Now, I don't think that there is really anything else you can say. Obviously, you want to be optimistic about how your team is going to perform, and a 90-game season is, that's a playoff spot almost. It's up there. It's contending for one. But do you think that's really even a possibility for this Mets team?
I think, and I like the Mets a lot, but I think what Sandy Alderson is saying here is 1 year ahead of schedule. I think maybe even 2 years ahead of schedule, but if I was a Mets fan being optimistic,
Really, that quickly?
I'd say, well, if I'm being optimistic here, next year, if Sandy Alderson said, I'm going to go out and win 90 games, I'd be like, okay, I respect, I go for it, Sandy. So I think the Mets have a lot of good pieces. I loved the Granderson signing because it showed the fans, look, we have a plan. We're not just going to we're not going to take another 90-loss season.
But I'm not crazy about that Granderson signing in particular, just because sure he's got power. The Mets are lacking power, but what they're lacking even more is the ability to get on base. Last season, they had a 306 collective on-base percentage. The major league average is 317. That number needs to go up, and Curtis Granderson isn't going to make that happen. I think if you're looking at the starting rotation for the Mets, it's not bad. I mean, it's really could be a lot worse. I mean, Bartolo Colon is the new addition, and he's an underrated pitcher, so I think that's fine, but the bullpen is a huge question mark, and the team cannot get on base.
Well, I think the pitching rotation, you said it wasn't bad. In 2 years, it could go from not bad to excellent. And I don't think Granderson is a savior to the organization by any means. I don't think he'll get them to the place where they need to. They will win 90 games. I don't think they'll win 90 games this season. But I think Granderson, along with some of the other additions, maybe move them to 80 wins. If they can go 500. When you look at teams who start to rebuild, they need that year before they put it all together to get the ball rolling, to change the culture in the locker room, to have a spring training where you're not going in thinking, I got another year of this, don't I? So I think Granderson, he's not going to help them get on base, but he will help them. He'll help them drive some more runs across the plate. If that's all they need to get the ball rolling, then next winter we see him improve the team a little more, help the team get on base a little bit, improve the bullpen, which I think is a massive weakness. I think that 90-win prediction is 1 year, probably more realistically, 2 years ahead of schedule, but I do like what the Mets have been doing, and I have to, you can't question his attitude. If I'm a Mets fan,
Absolutely.
and Sandy Alderson says we're going to win 90 games, I'm like, yes, we are. I'm sick. I would be sick of these 90 lost seasons. I want a GM who has vision and is not afraid to stick by his vision.
No, that's absolutely true. I mean, and don't get me wrong, Curtis Granderson is a great player. He's a great power guy who used to not be able to hit against lefties and now is great at it. I just don't think he addresses the number one need that this Mets offense has. But I want to start our division by division picks, and I want to take a look. Let's start with the NL East, just because that's where the Mets play, and I don't think either of us have them winning this division. I think the odds are extremely low. But who do you have taking home the NL West crown?
NL East.
NL East.
I really like the Atlanta Braves. I want to pick them, but once you look at the Washington Nationals team, and it's a team with very few flaws. You can say their hitting is weak, which I think could hold them back from possibly a World Series ring, but just in that division in the NL East, I would be surprised if it was anyone other than the Washington Nationals. The Nationals are going to bring a division title to the nation's capital.
This kind of reminds me, I mean, if I'm going to say what's most likely to happen here, I think you're right. I think Washington, but I agree with you also that Atlanta's a really intriguing pick. I'm going to go with the Nationals as well. If I'm going to put money on it, I'm saying Washington's going to win it just because I feel like that's the team that's most likely to win. But Atlanta's starting rotation is really underrated. And a great rotation will bring you a long way, especially in the National League.
It's Atlanta Braves team that we will be seeing at the end of September, searching for a playoff spot, and I'd be surprised if we didn't see them in October, at least for that one play-in game. I like the Braves a lot moving forward. You don't have to win your division to win a title.
What about the Central in the National League?
Central, I think, is one of the, it's a clear-cut pick here. It's the San Antonio Spurs of Major League Baseball, the St. Louis Cardinals. They're good every year. They lost in the World Series last year, which I think is going to help them, but I'm not going to say that yet. I'm saving that for later. But I like the Cardinals, straightforward. Pittsburgh's team to watch out for, though, if we're talking about second wild card spots.
Yeah, and I agree with you again. I think St. Louis, I mean, we say it all the time, but it's true. They always contend for a title, and to contend for a title, you need to win your division. I think that's going to happen, but I think it's very, very close between St. Louis and Pittsburgh. This Pittsburgh team is a really fun team to watch. The fans are backing them, and you talk about getting the ball rolling. That's happening in Pittsburgh right now, so I think that's going to be a great race to watch. It's pretty much it's a two-team race for the NL Central. Let's move to the NL West. Who you got?
Not even a two-team race, one-team race. I'm going to say Dodgers, best record in the NL West, best record in the National League, best record in baseball.
Really?
National League Dodgers take home the President's Trophy.
Ooh. They're in a weak division, which certainly helps if you're talking best record. Certainly the Dodgers are going to win the NL West. I mean, Arizona, Colorado, San Diego, the Giants have really fallen off since those two World Series titles. So I think that's an easy win for the Dodgers. I don't think they're going to win the best record in baseball, and I don't think the best record in baseball matters all the time, just because, the playoffs are bigger now. I want to save the AL East for the end. Let's move to the AL Central Division. Who's your pick?
I gotta do it. I gotta pick Kansas City Royals.
Woo!
It's a team that for so long has said, just give us some more time. We're gonna put it together.
Yep.
Next year we got it. Last year they sort of was a little bit less of a lie than most years. So I think if it's not now, when. So Kansas City Royals, I think they're going to do it this year. I really like what they got going. Cleveland Indians, though, not a team to count out entirely. They finished the season really strong. They could be another team ahead of schedule. I mean, Detroit's the favorite, but I like the Royals.
Yeah, I've got Cleveland finishing second in my division too, but I have them finishing second to the Detroit Tigers. I just feel like if you're talking about upside, Detroit's got upside too, because think about it, Justin Verlander did not have a good year last year. If he bounces back, that Tigers rotation, which is already very good, led by Max Scherzer, if Verlander bounces back, that's really going to be a rotation to contend with, and you're not going to argue with Detroit's lineup. Any team that has Miguel Cabrera on their side has a great lineup. I just feel like Kansas City can put it together, but it's another year for me. Let's move AL West. Pick.
Oakland A's. I mean, Texas Rangers. I think the AL West has followed a similar sort of. It's followed a similar script every offseason. The Angels are the Rangers. They make moves. Mm-hmm. And then in the regular season, the Oakland A's win the division. I like the A's. I think the Rangers are a good team. They made nice additions in the offseason, but this is the A's division.
To me, the AL West is a division in decline. I think these teams, just because if you look at it, the way I look at it is the Seattle Mariners. Sure, they grabbed Robinson Cano. That's just one player, but I think this vaults them into a third-place finish in this division. I agree with you. Oakland is going to win it, but the AL West is not nearly as strong as it once was, and I feel like it's always more strong in the preseason than it is when it actually goes, when this season actually begins.
Well, let's go back for the Mariners for 1 second, because it is such an interesting team. Mm-hmm. They made the huge splash of the offseason. I would be really surprised if Seattle won more than 83 games.
Really?
I'm gonna say I'd be really surprised if the Mariners,
that division, I think they can finish ahead of the Angels. I think they can finish ahead of Houston.
I don't think Seattle's gonna do it. It just Robinson Cano played last year for a Yankees team that didn't make the playoffs, and I think this Mariners.
I'm not saying they're gonna make the playoffs.
Oh no, I'm saying that I'm just using that to say like this is baseball. Your best player is going to come to the plate 4 times a game. You can spend as much money as you want on him. I'd be surprised if Seattle won more than 83
Well, I mean, you're talking about.
I'm not a believer in the Mariners.
All right, I'm not wholeheartedly endorsing that they're going to be a great team, but I'm saying they're better than the Angels and they're better than the Astros. I think that's going to happen. We'll see. American League East, it's the best division in baseball, and this year it is just as hard to pick as it always seems to be. Who you got?
I think the 2 best teams in the American League sit in this division, the Tampa Bay Rays and the Boston Red Sox. So, using the age-old method, before filming, I flipped a coin. Heads won. Heads was the Boston Red Sox. Boston Red Sox, maybe not going to repeat a title, but they're still a great team. They were the best team in baseball by a solid margin last season. I don't think they did much to improve off that, but it's not a bad place to ending at the top. I think they'll at least stay at the top of their division.
I've got Tampa Bay just because their starting rotation is scary, and Joe Madden is the best manager in baseball. But I've got a different team finishing second in this division. I've got the Baltimore Orioles finishing in second position in the AL East, and I've got them grabbing a wild card spot just because in this era of declining offenses, the Orioles probably have the best power lineup in baseball. I mean, they've got. I mean, listen, they play in a hitter's ballpark. They're playing in a division where there's a lot of offense, where the pitching is not as good as it could be unless you're playing Tampa, which is why I think Tampa's going to win this division pretty easily. And do I think they're going to go far in the postseason? No, but do not sleep on Baltimore. And I feel like of these 4 teams, Tampa, Boston, Baltimore, and the Yankees, one of them is going to regress, one of them is going to underperform, and the Blue Jays aren't going to do anything.
And we saw that last year. It was the same scenario going into the AL East. Just you add Toronto into the mix too, because it was sort of like these look like 5 great teams.
Remember when we thought that the Blue Jays were going to be good?
These look like 5 great teams, but one of them, you can count on at least one of them to sort of regress. So it'll be interesting to see who it's going to be this year. But they look like 4 playoff teams. We probably won't see 4 playoff teams on the field, but it does make for some interesting conversation. Let's move on to the postseason now. We've got our division winners. We sort of know our wild card picks. Out of the National League, who do you like?
Out of the National League, I like the St. Louis Cardinals. I feel like the Dodgers are going to once again be that team that spends a lot of money but doesn't put it together as a unit, and I feel like St. Louis does that enough to win the National League pennant.
I agree absolutely. Let's keep up the cross-sport references. Once again, I talked about with Robinson Cano. It's not basketball. You can't, there are 9 guys on the team that all have to play. Mm-hmm. So I think the Los Angeles Dodgers, they have a lot of great players spread out across the field, but I think they have a lot of weaknesses too that can be exposed. And the St. Louis Cardinals, almost the exact opposite. They're such a good team year in and year out. They have very few flaws. They were the best team in the National League in the postseason last year. I think they can repeat, and I think that loss to the Red Sox in the World Series, it made, you talk about what happened the year before when you talk about championship teams, because a lot of the times they do have those devastating playoff exits, and it sort of gives them what they need. I don't know if you believe in the psyche of an athlete, but it gives them what they do need. Have that hungry competition, look for the title next year. I believe it.
I'm not that big as of going into athletes' heads about this kind
I
of
believe
thing.
it. I think the St. Louis Cardinals are they're a hungry team.
Yeah, a hungry team, sure. What about the American League?
The American League, I really like Tampa Bay, and I really like. This is so hard.
I know who I've got.
Go first.
I've got the Rays. I've got the Tampa Bay Rays. And for me, it's that starting rotation. When we were looking in at the early portions of this offseason, looking at how Tampa Bay was going to do, we assumed that David Price was not going to be a part of this rotation. And I feel like we're looking now that David Price somehow was not dealt, somehow did not leave this team, is coming back to Tampa. They've got David Price, they've got Alex Kyle, they've got a rotation that is the best in the division, that could well be the best in the American League. Plus a manager that knows what he's doing he can put together a lineup better than any other guy in baseball in Joe Madden. Their offense will do what it needs to back up this pitching staff. I've got Tampa in the American League. I'd stall a little bit more, but we're running out of time.
Who knows? Oakland A's. Because
Okay.
this is their year.
All right.
And because sometimes stuff just happens and no one knows.
It's baseball. I
It's
love it.
baseball. And it's the Oakland A's and the St. Louis Cardinals in 5 games.
So you've got the A's winning the World Series?
I got Cardinals over A's.
Cardinals over
in
A's.
5 games.
In 5 games.
Because it's baseball.
And
right?
I've got Tampa over St. Louis.
Because it's
For the reasons I have already described. I mean,
for no reasons. I have Cardinals over A's for no reasons other than that.
Here's an interesting trivia question, though. Since the beginning of the 2008 season to last year, you know what's the best record in baseball? Yankees. You know who's second?
You know who didn't give me any time to think about that?
But you know,
Carter.
but you know who's second in second place?
Oakland or St. Louis?
Tampa Bay.
Oh, good God.
Tampa Bay. More 90-win seasons than anybody else over that span, too. And that's what's it to you. I've got a parting shot coming up right now. I just want to talk real quick. We're really running out of time here. But Minute Maid Park in Houston, they've got this thing called Tal's Hill. It's a big, I think it's 60 feet wide, and it's a 30-degree incline in the outfield. Not as just an incline where the outfielders are stumbling, bumbling as they try to make a catch all the way back in the outfield, but there's a flagpole right there in play in center field. What are you doing? Listen, that would make sense to me if that was the only way you could get that center field wall back out to a reasonable height. Well, we need to put this thing in there. We need to put the flagpole in there. I get that. That center field wall, 436 feet. That, to my knowledge, is the deepest in baseball. Just bring it in 20 feet and get rid of all this nonsense. That's what I have to say. What's It To Ya is over and done with for this week. We'll be back same bat time, same bat channel 1 week from now. Make sure to hit up our Facebook page with all the questions that you need. We will go back to social media next week, we promise. And our YouTube page. If you are watching this on YouTube, there's a subscribe button right there, and I'll be your best friend if you click that button. We'll be back next week. So long.